I never believed the stories my grandmother used to tell. Tales about spirits slipping through walls, shadows that followed the living, and women who wandered through houses at night searching for someone who owed them something. She used to warn me never to ignore the sound of footsteps coming from inside a home that should be empty. Spirits walk like us, she'd whisper, but they don't obey doors. I'd always laugh her off. Doors were solid, walls were impenetrable, and the dead didn't walk. At least, that's what I thought before moving into the apartment on Willow Lane. The place was cheap, shockingly cheap. Rent was almost half of what other places in the area demanded. It was a compact 2-bedroom unit on the second floor of an aging 3-story building. The landlord told me the previous tenant moved out suddenly due to a family emergency, but the tenants downstairs said she simply vanished one night. I didn't believe them at the time, assuming it was just neighborhood gossip meant to spook newcomers. But they weren't smiling when they told me. Their faces were stiff, their eyes downcast, and one of them pressed a rosary into my hand like I'd needed. I should have taken that more seriously. The first week was uneventful. The place had old pipes that rattled, floorboards that creaked, and heaters that hummed loud enough to mask most noises. I thought nothing of it, until the 8th night. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I heard footsteps inside my apartment. Not from upstairs, not from the hallway, but from inside my living room. I froze. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, as though whoever was walking was in a hurry. I lay still on my bed, listening. One step, another, then another. They were heavy enough to distinguish from the building's usual sounds. This wasn't creaking wood. This was a person, a grown adult walking back and forth. I sat up, quietly, my heart thumping. At first, I suspected maybe one of the neighbors had accidentally wandered into my place, but the door had been locked. I always checked it before bed, so I grabbed my phone and turned on flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but before I could stand up, the footsteps stopped. Abruptly, silence filled the apartment. I waited. Nothing. Gathering my courage, I crept out of my room and walked into the living room. It was empty. The door was still locked, the windows shut, and nothing seemed out of place. I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening. No more footsteps came. I tried to brush it off the next morning. Maybe the sound had drifted in from outside the door, or maybe the building shifted oddly. I told myself anything that would make sense. But the following night, the footsteps returned. This time, they were louder and closer. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps circling my bed. Not outside, not the living room, inside my bedroom. And these steps were slow, dragging slightly, as if the person walking was tired or injured. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I didn't even dare turn on my phone's light. I simply stared at the ceiling, praying that somehow, some way, it was just my imagination. Then I heard breathing. Soft, ragged, uneven. Not my breathing. Someone else's. It was right beside me. I felt cold air brush against my exposed arm, as if someone leaned over me. Still, I didn't move. I was too terrified to. After nearly a full minute of heavy breathing hovering near my face, the air shifted away. The footsteps moved toward the far wall of my bedroom and stopped. Then came 3 long, deliberate knocks. On the wall, but not as though someone was knocking from inside my room. No, the knocks came from inside the wall itself. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my keys, and bolted out of the apartment. I didn't go back until sunrise. That morning, I searched the wall for anything unusual. Holes, cracks, weird openings. Nothing. The drywall was intact. No sign of pests. Nothing that could explain footsteps or knocks. I even called maintenance, and they checked for water leaks or pipes behind the wall. They found nothing. But the noises continued every night, escalating. By the second week, I could hear the footsteps begin every night at around 2:45 a.m. They would start faintly in the living room, grow louder as they approached the hallway, then enter my bedroom. The breathing returned too, raspy, labored, sounding like whoever it belonged to was forcing air through damaged lungs. One night, I swear I even heard whispering. I don't know what possessed me to stay as long as I did. Maybe I thought I could reason with myself, that I was stressed or overtired, or maybe I didn't want to believe something supernatural was happening. But eventually, I had no choice. Because I saw her. It was the 17th night. I woke up to footsteps again, but this time they weren't slow. They were frantic, pacing rapidly back and forth. The sound was right outside my bedroom door. At first, it sounded like someone was sprinting in place. Then it stopped suddenly. The doorknob rattled. I bolted upright, clutching my blanket. The knob shook violently, as if someone was trying to force their way in. Then, with a soft metallic click, the door opened on its own. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It was like my body had turned to ice. A figure stepped inside. A woman. But she wasn't walking normally. She floated a few inches above the floor, her bare feet hovering, swinging slightly as though balancing on invisible air. Her hair was long, matted, covering most of her face except for one visible eye, wide, unblinking, and completely gray. Her clothes were torn, as if she clawed at them. More importantly, her skin was pale. Not just pale, but the kind of grayish-white you see on corpses in crime documentaries. She turned her head toward me, the single eye trembling, like she was searching for something. Her mouth opened slowly, unnaturally wide, the jaw stretching lower than it should. And then she spoke. But her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came from the walls. "Where is it?" The voice echoed around the room, vibrated through the floor, bounced within the drywall. I couldn't tell if she was asking me or demanding me. She floated closer. I pressed myself against the headboard, trying to get as far away from her as possible. She leaned forward until her face was inches from mine. Her hair brushed against my cheek. Her cold breath hit my skin. Her eye twitched violently as she scanned my face. Then, slowly, jerkily, her head turned toward the wall behind my bed. Her mouth snapped shut. She drifted backward, lowered into the wall, and passed straight through it. No resistance, no sound, no crack. She simply melted into it like fog, dissolving into air. I didn't leave my bedroom until morning. I didn't sleep at all. I sat against the opposite wall, hugging my knees, watching the spot where she disappeared. The next day, I decided to investigate whether someone had died in the apartment. But the landlord dodged my questions. The neighbors downstairs refused to talk. The guy living next to my unit slammed his door shut when I brought it up. No one wanted to say anything. It was almost as if they feared acknowledging her. But the woman kept appearing. Some nights, she walked through the living room wall and floated into the hallway. Other nights, she sank through the ceiling, materializing above me. Once I caught her crawling, yes, crawling, across the ceiling like a spider, her limbs bending grotesquely. She'd stop above my bed and dangle her head upside down, staring at me with that single gray eye. I couldn't take it anymore. I tried to spend nights outside the apartment, at friends' place, at a cheap hotel, even in my car. But the moment I was gone for more than 24 hours, the landlord called me, saying it violated my rental contract. I had no idea how he even knew I wasn't home, but his tone was sharp, threatening almost. "You need to sleep in the unit at least 4 nights a week," he insisted. Why? Why would a landlord care about occupancy so much? That didn't make sense unless he knew something needed me there. I ignored him, but the next night, when I returned to grab more clothes, I found a note slid under my door. "You can't leave her alone." No signature. Something was deeply wrong. On the next night I stayed, the haunting changed. The footsteps were furious, stomping through the apartment. The breathing was louder, angrier, almost like growling. And for the first time, the woman didn't come alone. Something else moved in the shadows. I could hear it crawling behind the walls. Not walking, crawling. Fast, scratching, skittering like an animal with too many limbs. Sometimes it scratched close to an outlet. Sometimes behind the bathroom tiles. Once the drywall bulged as if something pushed from the inside. The woman would appear and point at the walls. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide. Each time she opened it, that crawling inside the wall would intensify. It dawned on me slowly, horribly. She wasn't a threat. She was warning me. The thing inside the walls, that was the real threat. The 26th night was when everything spiraled. I had fallen asleep out of pure exhaustion, only to wake to the sound of drilling. But it wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of something boring into the wall behind my bed. A rapid, furious grinding. The drywall cracked. Dust spilled across my pillow. Then a hand pushed through. Not a human hand. It was long, blackened, with 6 thin fingers that bent in the wrong direction. Each fingertip ended in a sharp, chitin-like claw. The hand groped blindly, searching, scratching at my sheets. I screamed and rolled off the bed. More cracks split along the wall. Another hand burst through, then another. The wall pulsed, buckled, as if something enormous was forcing its way out. And then, I heard her, the woman. She appeared through the opposite wall, floating quickly toward me. Her single eye was wide with desperation, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. She grabbed my arm. Not physically, but the air turned ice cold around it, and I felt myself being yanked backward. She pulled me toward the door. The creature behind a wall roared, a guttural, animalistic sound that shook the entire apartment. More limbs pushed through the wall, the drywall shredded like paper. Something massive began to emerge, a twisted, multi-limbed mass of darkness and bone. The woman pushed me through the doorway as the wall behind my bed exploded outward. I stumbled into the hallway, scrambling to my feet. The woman hovered before me, pointing toward the exit staircase. Her gray eye locked onto mine. "Run," her voice echoed, not from her lips, but from the walls themselves. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted down the hallway, down the stairs, out of the building. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if that thing made it through the wall. I drove away and never returned. The landlord called many times afterward, demanding I come back, claiming I breached the contract. Eventually, the calls stopped. A few weeks later, the building burned down in what the news called an unexplained electrical fire. They found no bodies inside, not even the landlord's. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying awake, I hear footsteps, slow, dragging ones, and a faint whisper, "Where is he?" And I know she's still looking for the person who wronged her. And the thing from the walls is still looking for someone to replace me. I've always believed that every building has a memory. Some places hold warmth, old laughter trapped in wooden frames, echoes of family gatherings, remnants of joy. Other places hold something else entirely. Something cold, something watching, something waiting. In apartment 303, the room directly across the hall from mine, held something I wish I had never discovered. When I first moved into the complex, the hallway on the 3rd floor felt oddly quiet. The other tenants smiled politely, but never lingered. Most kept their doors locked with additional chains, as if they feared something wandering the hall at night. I shrugged it off. Old buildings have quirks, I told myself. Every place has a history, and I was just grateful to find an affordable place close to work. My unit, 302, was small but comfortable. The only thing that bothered me was the door across the hall, apartment 303. It always remained shut. No decorations, no welcome mat, no sound from inside. The peephole was covered with black tape. At first, I assumed it was simply vacant. But a few days after I moved in, I noticed something strange. Whenever I passed by 303, I felt someone watching me. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It was a sensation, sharp cold like a thin needle pressing against the back of my neck. One night, when I returned home late, I swear I saw the door move. Just a slight shift inward, as if someone had been peeking through the crack and quickly shut it when they realized I saw. That should have been my warning. That should have been enough to make me ask questions. But I ignored it. I told myself that someone lived there and preferred privacy. That was fine by me. But things escalated quickly. It began with a knocking. At 1:12 a.m. on a Thursday, I woke to a soft, gentle knock. Not on my door, on the door across the hall. 3 light taps. Tap, tap, tap. I assumed someone had arrived late and didn't want to wake the whole floor. But when I peeked through my peephole, there was no one outside. Just the door to 303. The knocking came again the next night. Same time, same pattern. The 3rd night, I opened my door slightly and looked out. A man was standing in front of apartment 303. His back was turned to me. He wasn't knocking with his hand, but tapping his head, lightly, against the wooden door. His hair was long, uneven, greasy, covering most of his face. His clothes hung loosely on his thin frame, and he whispered something as he tapped. "I'm sorry. Let me in, please." He continued tapping his head, not violently, but rhythmically, mournfully, as though it was some kind of ritual. I whispered, "Sir, are you okay?" He stopped suddenly. Every muscle in my body tightened. Slowly, painfully slowly, he turned his head, but only halfway. He didn't turn his body, just twisted his neck until his face was angled toward me. His hair parted slightly, revealing one eye, wet, red, and unfocused. "You live here now," he croaked, voice raw. "Don't open your door at 303. Before I could respond, he turned back toward 303 and resumed tapping his head, softly, apologetically. I closed my door, locked it, and pushed a chair against it. I didn't sleep. That was the first time I heard the rule, but it wouldn't be the last. The next morning, I asked the building manager about the man in the unit across the hall. His expression darkened instantly. "There's no tenant in 303, he said, tapping furiously at his computer. "It's been empty for 10 years. Nobody should be knocking on that door. What about the man I saw? No one lives there." He repeated the sentence so firmly, so quickly, that it felt less like information and more like a warning, or a denial he needed to convince himself of. I didn't push further. That night, at 1:12 a.m., the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. Except this time, it wasn't coming from 303. It was coming from inside my apartment. I froze. The tapping was faint, soft, like someone gently knocking on a hollow surface. I followed the sound, heart pounding. It led me to the wall directly opposite 303, my living room wall. The taps were spaced evenly, 3 at a time. Tap, tap, tap. I pressed my ear to the wall. A whisper came through. "Let me in." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my coffee table, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. Over the next few days, the tapping and whispering grew more frequent. It happened at random times, dawn, noon, midnight. Always 3 taps. Always the same voice pleading. "Let me in." I avoided being home as much as possible. I stayed late at work, ate out, walked around aimlessly. Anything to avoid being in that apartment. But no matter where I went or what time I came back, the hall remained silent. Still, watching, a few tenants began glancing at me differently, as though they recognized something in me. Fear, maybe, or maybe they knew what was happening. One older woman, probably in her 70s, stopped me on the stairs. "You're in 302, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. She sighed, gripping my wrist tightly. "Don't look at it when it calls." "When what calls?" She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, 303. Remember that. More rules I didn't understand. But everything changed on the 21st night. I fell asleep on the couch after pulling a long shift at work. When I opened my eyes, the room was completely dark. My phone screen read, 3:03 a.m. My blood ran cold. A sound echoed across the hallway. A slow creak. The sound of a door opening. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I knew exactly what it was. The door to apartment 303. The one that had been locked and sealed for years, according to the manager. The one the man had warned me about. Soft footsteps entered the hallway. Not hurried, not angry, just searching. The footsteps reached my door and stopped. Silence stretched so long I thought my own heartbeat would give me away. Then, a whisper, not through the wall this time, right outside my door. "I know you're awake." My throat tightened. I covered my mouth with both hands, trying to silence my breathing. "You live here now," the voice said, mimicking the man's words perfectly, but not with his voice. It was distorted, layered, like many people whispering at once. Then came the tapping. Tap, 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 on my door. Not gentle, not mournful, impatient. "Let me in." I shut my eyes tightly. Tears streamed down my face. I shook my head, even though no one could see me. The whisper slid through the bottom of the door like cold smoke. "You saw him, didn't you?" My stomach twisted. It knew. It knew I had spoken to the man, tapping his head on its door. "You shouldn't have looked." The tapping turned to pounding, 3 violent booms that shook the frame. Thud, 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 and then silence. No footsteps, no voice, nothing. For an hour, I stayed crouched behind my couch, unable to move. At 4:16 a.m., I finally crawled to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing was there, but the door to 303 was open. Barely. Just a sliver. Light flickered from inside. A deep, unnatural red glow, like dying embers. I don't know how long I stared at that crack, mesmerized, horrified, unable to look away. Something moved inside. Not walking. Crawling. I shut my peephole quickly and slid down the door, trembling. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I just sat there until morning. At first light, I went to the building manager's office, ready to break down his door if he didn't answer. When he let me in, I told him everything. Every sound, every whisper, every rule, every detail about the man who warned me. The manager didn't look surprised, not even a little. Instead, he closed the blinds, locked the door, and sat down heavily. "You shouldn't have acknowledged apartment 303, he said quietly. "If you ignore it, it ignores you. But once it realizes you know it's there." He trailed off, staring at the wall behind me. I followed his gaze. A small crack was forming in the paint. I stepped away from it instinctively. The manager swallowed hard. "It's been here long before this building. Before any of us. It chooses one door every few decades. One room, and anyone living across from it becomes part of its attention." "What does it want?" I whispered. His eyes filled with something that looked like pity. Company. That word alone sent shivers ripping down my spine. "What happened to the man who warned me?" I asked. The manager lowered his eyes. "He lived in your unit before you. You try to move out, but once it chooses you, it doesn't let go easily." I felt my knees weaken. "So what do I do?" "Move immediately," he said, handing me a paper. "I can't stop you. Just don't be here tonight. Leave everything. Don't look back." I didn't wait. I didn't pack. I didn't even return to my apartment. I drove to my brother's house an hour away and stayed on his couch. That night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., I woke to the sound of tapping. In my brother's hallway. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. A whisper traveled through the vents. "You live across from me." I cover my ears. "Let me in." I squeeze my eyes shut. "You saw me." The tapping rolled across the walls like fingers brushing the inside of the house. "You're mine now." I couldn't breathe. I still can't. Because every night since then, no matter where I go, no matter how far or how fast I run, at exactly 3:03 a.m., I hear 3 taps. Tap, 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 and a soft whisper. "Open your door." And I know one night, one mistake, one forgotten lock, and it will finally step through. If you think the worst thing a neighbor can do is play loud music or park in your spot, you have no idea. Some neighbors hide secrets behind their smiles. Some watch you when you sleep. And some, like the ones I encountered, were never human to begin with. If you're reading this, remember, the danger isn't outside your home. It's living right next to you. I moved into apartment 3C because it was cheap, too cheap, and because I was desperate. I had 36 hours to leave my old place after the building was condemned, and 3C was the only option that wasn't a mattress in someone's basement. The landlord barely looked at me during the walkthrough. He slid the lease across the table and muttered, "No noise complaints. No late night calls. And don't go near 3B." That should have been a red flag. But when you're broke, red flags look like decorations. The first day passed without incident. The building was old, with narrow halls, peeling wallpaper, and lights that flickered like they were winking. The kind of place where the air is always slightly too still. My dog, Milo, sniffed everything with cautious curiosity. He never barked. Not once. Not until later. By the second night, I started to understand why the rent was low. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the apartment above me, 4C, erupted in footsteps. Heavy steps. Fast ones. Like someone sprinting from wall to wall. I stared up at the ceiling. My heart raced with each thump. It went on for 8 straight minutes. Then stopped. Dead silent. No door opened. No pipe groaned. Just silence. I told myself it was normal. Old building. Bad insulation. Maybe the upstairs guy was a night owl. Or doing cardio at 1 a.m. Who cared? But the next night, it happened again. 1:13 a.m. footsteps. Faster this time. Running. Slamming into walls. Milo growled at the ceiling, tail tucked. On the third night, it changed. At 1:13 a.m., instead of footsteps, I heard whispering from the vents. Not words, just breath. Slow, shaky, deliberate breath. It grew louder, deeper, until it sounded like someone was crouched inside the vents, inhaling right above me. Milo barked and ran under the table. I sat frozen on the couch, staring at the vent as the shadows inside it rippled. Then, a single fingernail tapped the metal. Soft, slow, intentional. Tap, tap, tap. I barely slept that night. By the end of the week, I was a wreck. Pale, sleep-deprived, jumping at every sound. I asked the landlord, who lives in 4C. He didn't look up from his paperwork when he replied, "Nobody." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he didn't smile. "There hasn't been a tenant in 4C for 7 years," he said. "Don't ask again." I felt cold all over. "What about the noises?" He finally looked at me, eyes tired. "You signed the lease. No complaints." I opened my mouth to argue, but he stood and walked away before I could speak another word. That night, everything escalated. At 1:13 a.m., the footsteps started, but not above me. They were inside my apartment, right outside my bedroom door. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Milo whimpered, pressing his body against mine under the covers. I held him tightly, too afraid to breathe. The footsteps circled my room. One slow round, then another. Then they stopped at the foot of my bed. I didn't dare open my eyes, but I felt it. Something standing there, watching, something that was not breathing. Minutes passed, hours maybe, I don't know. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I found muddy footprints on the bedroom floor. Small ones, bare feet. They led from the door to the foot of my bed and stopped there. I didn't own anything that could have made those prints. I lived alone. I had no visitors. The apartment door had been locked. I scrubbed the floor until the prints faded, but I couldn't erase the sinking feeling inside me. By the next night, I'd reached my breaking point. I stayed awake, sitting against the wall with the lights on, waiting for 1:13 a.m. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I needed to prove the noises weren't real. At 1:12 a.m., the light flickered. Once, twice. Then all at once, the apartment was plunged into darkness. Milo began barking uncontrollably. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The room lit up, and the vent across from me rattled violently. Metal bending, screws snapping. Then, a whisper. "Daniel." My heart stopped. I froze. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the building. It knew my name. The vent bulged outward, as if something was pushing against it from the inside. The metal creaked, warped, bent. Then a hand slipped through the slats. A small hand, pale, fingers impossibly long and thin, nails cracked and yellow, reaching downward toward the floor. I couldn't breathe. The hand patted the air as if searching, feeling, exploring, looking for me. Milo barked and lunged toward it, snapping. The hand retreated instantly, sliding backward into the darkness. The metal vent snapped back into place, leaving no trace it had ever happened. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on until sunrise. In the morning, I went upstairs to 4C. The hallway felt colder, the air heavier. The door to 4C was covered in dust. The doorknob was rusted. A thick chain was looped around it, secured with an old padlock. No one had been inside for years. But the smell coming from the bottom of the door, that faint, damp, earthy smell, it reminded me of dirt, engraved soil. I bent down to peek under the door. Darkness, just darkness. I exhaled a shaky breath and stood, but then something tapped on the other side of the door. Once, soft, right where my face had been. I ran back downstairs, adrenaline flooding my system. I should have moved out that day. Anyone with sense would have. But fear makes you stupid. Fear makes you hesitate. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was a raccoon in the vents, or the pipes expanding, or anything but what I knew deep down. So I stayed, and that was the worst mistake of my life. 2 nights later, everything changed. I was washing dishes when I felt a chill. Not cold, a presence, a weight in the room. I turned slowly. In the hallway by my bedroom, the shadows seemed thicker, darker, and then a small silhouette stepped out. A child, bare feet, head tilted, eyes black from corner to corner. Its skin had the same pale, stretched look as the hand in the vent, as though it didn't belong to a living body, as though it was borrowed. I dropped the plate in the sink. It shattered. Milo barked and ran behind me. The child didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. I whispered, "W, what do you want?" It raised one bony finger and pointed toward the ceiling, toward 4C. Then it whispered in a voice layered with dozens of others, "We're not supposed to be here." Before I could speak, the child blinked out of existence. Not ran, not disappeared, just snapped out like someone turned off a light. I collapsed to the floor. I called the landlord the next morning. I didn't care about the lease. I didn't care about losing my deposit. "I'm leaving," I said. He sighed, sounding almost relieved. "I wondered how long you'd last. Is this place haunted?" I shouted. "No," he said quietly. "They're not ghosts." "Then what are they?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Pack fast." I threw everything into trash bags and boxes. I didn't care what I left behind. As I walked out the door for the last time, I felt the hairs rise on my neck. A whisper drifted down from the ceiling. "Don't go." I didn't look back. I slammed the door behind me, sprinted to my car, and sped away. But here's the part that haunts me. The part one can't explain. An hour after I left, the landlord called. His voice was trembling. "You didn't take your dog," he said. My heart stopped. "Milo's here," I insisted. He's in the car with me." "No," the landlord whispered. "There's a dog in 3C, scratching at the walls, growling at the vents." I pulled over and looked in the back seat. Milo was asleep, breathing softly. "Don't go back," the landlord said. "Whatever is in that apartment, it knows you're gone." I hung up. I cried. I drove away and never looked back. But some nights, around 1:13 a.m., Milo wakes up snarling, staring at the vents, as if something is whispering to him, calling through the walls, looking for me. They never stay quiet.